I speak to you in the name of our living God, Creator, Christ, and Holy Spirit. Amen. I don't know about you, but in my household, this week has been one of preparations. Preparing, most of all, for the new school year. Helping my new first grader and second grader prepare for the beginning of the year at their school, which still feels quite new to them, as this is our first beginning of the year in this place. And the preparations involved in starting a new school year are manifold. Can I get an amen? Manifold and never-ending, which I remembered last Sunday night in Target in the school supply aisle with several other dazed and sleep-deprived parents. Oh, right. I have to finish buying the school supplies required for Tuesday. And the trouble is that by, say, 9 p.m. on a Sunday night right before the start of school, there isn't terribly much left on the school supplies section. So there I am with these two, what seem to me, very detailed list of school supplies for second grade and first grade, looking for these items. Some are in plain sight. 24-pack of crayons, check and check. Others are more elusive. For second grade, there was needed a large pencil box that would fit everything. Now first I feel like we need to define everything, right? Like how much really is going into this box? For the first grader, he needed a small pencil box that only fits, I think, pencils, scissors. How big and small are these pencil boxes? I'm not sure. Didn't really matter because there were no pencil boxes left. I also found myself thinking about how, now when I go to buy school supplies for myself on my own timeline just based on what I need whenever I need it, it's a delight. I mean, who does not love pouring through all the different colors of markers and colored pencils and Sharpies? There's not much I love more than like 100-pack of Sharpies in all the different colors possible. But when it comes to buying, I see some of you laughing, yes, you're learning more about me. When it comes to buying supplies for my own kids, gosh, that feels very stressful. And I think, as I was pondering in the Target aisle last Sunday night, that the stress is because I care so much about their education, right? As a parent, I will do anything for their opportunities, for their growth, for their education, for their growing into wise and lively and heart-filled, compassionate humans. So in that light, suddenly the school supply list becomes rather stressful. Like if I do not find everything on this list, am I diminishing their opportunities to become wise and compassionate and lively human beings? The stress is very high. The stress was high because I care and value so much of their growth, so much of what lies before them, so much of the opportunities before them, of the horizons ahead of them that will change, which puts then the preparations for such growth and change into a sharper relief. It strikes me that Jesus, in the gospel story today, which is a continuation of the story that we heard last week, is also something about preparations. More than that, it's about preparing for what we truly value. It's about identifying what is most important and where our heart and letting that guide our preparations. So here we are again with Jesus, and we are in a large crowd that has gathered around this enigmatic and charismatic man. Many of them, I think, trying to absorb some of the truth that he seems to emanate, body and word. Some of them perhaps just mildly curious to figure out what this crowd is about. And we're walking along, and then Jesus stops and whirls around and says, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot follow me." Mic drop. I imagine that a good number in the crowd began to walk away at that point. Yet he continues, "Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple." Now at this point, Jesus' future with the cross has of course not happened. So that connection would not be in their minds, it would not register for them what he is saying. But the cross as a means of execution would have been common in those days. And they probably were thinking, what does a cross have to do with him and with anything that he's saying? What does leaving behind family, what does hating life itself have to do with anything that he's saying? I imagine that another good number of people may have drifted away from the crowd at that point. He continues, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who will see it will ridicule him, saying, 'This one began to build and was not able to finish.'" Now, talking about a tower, I could not help but leap from Jesus' words to this crowd to our tower. Our tower. With the oldest bells in the city of Detroit, with a number of new bells that ring brilliantly on the hour and before our services. And thinking of those who have come before us in this place, those who in the late 1850s and early 1860s were designing and building this place and that very tower. What did it look like when they sat down? They must have sat down together to not only determine the cost, but determine and discuss among themselves what they were about and what they were building for. What would this new building stand for? What would this tower stand for? As they began to sit down and talk, there was already a building on that site where the tower is. The first structure, built in 1845, 1846, making this site the site of the longest-serving Protestant congregation in the city of Detroit. We are the congregation that has been at the same location for the longest period of time in this city. And I know that one of their desires was simply to build a larger building, because by that point in the late 1850s, they not only had outgrown the initial wooden building on Jefferson, but they had also been starting to outgrow the stone chapel that they were building that faces Woodbridge and is now the choir room. So they're sitting down together. I like to imagine, wondering, dreaming, what is God doing in this place? What is happening here? How is God moving among us, and what do we do about it? How do we precisely estimate the cost for something as concrete, literally, as a building and a tower? And how do we sacrifice amongst ourselves toward that vision? Thanks be to God that they sat down and discussed and estimated what it would take to complete. Last week we were also talking about, as we situated ourselves in these stories of Jesus ministering in these Gospels of Luke, among the crowds that seemed to follow him all over the place. Last week we heard his parable about a wedding banquet where Jesus exhorted his listeners not to assume too high of a table, too high of a chair at a given banquet, but to simply wait for the host to invite you into a certain position, which strikes me as common sense and good manners. And then, as today, he stops and whirls around and says, and to you, hosts, when you open your doors to host the banquet, do not invite only those who can return the favor in kind, who also can invite you to their family's banquet, who also can open their home to you, but invite precisely those who might not be able to return the invitation. As he says, invite precisely the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Attend to and invite those who may not be able to return the favor in kind, and then you will be close to God. There you will be in the kingdom of God. For among those who have greatest need is where the heart of God beats relentlessly. So we, as followers of Jesus, might be called today to set down whatever gets in the way of us and the heart of God, whatever occludes us, whatever is an obstacle to us, and to dare to situate ourselves into that very heart of God. And we were asking ourselves last week, what is that heart of God here in the heart of Detroit? How are we as Christ Church a beacon of hope here in the heart of Detroit, as has been our mission for so long, but is a question we must always have before us, as Jesus is always challenging and questioning those who travel with him. How are we exactly a beacon of hope here in the heart of Detroit? What does that hope look like? And we said that our hope looks like music. Welcome back, right? Our hope looks like how we visit one another in each other's homes, sharing communion and a prayer shawl. Our hope looks like fellowship over food. Welcome back, breakfast teas. Thanks be to God. Our hope takes so many forms, and Jesus exhorts us, as he did his first followers, to articulate that hope and keep it always before us. How is this tower, this building, and yes, our own hearts, a beacon of hope here in the heart of Detroit? On a similar note, I received a letter this week from my seminary, where I studied and was formed for the priesthood, Virginia Theological Seminary in Alexandria, just outside of D.C. And Virginia Seminary announced this week that they are starting an endowment as a start toward their reparations for engaging in slavery in their origins. Virginia Seminary, or as I'll say, VTS, Virginia Theological Seminary, was founded in 1823, and as they approach their 200th year, not so unlike our approaching our 175th year next year, the seminary is digging down deep into who they are and what they stand for. Specifically, the main seminary building, which stood as the only seminary building for a long time, at least 50 years, maybe even 100 years, it was the only seminary building, is a wooden brick, as is common in, not wooden brick, red brick, as is common in Virginia, style with a large white steeple for a tower. And indeed, a large steeple that seminarians climb up right before graduation, and we sign our names inside the tower. So my name's up there somewhere. And this hall, Aspinwall Hall, is the image of the seminary. It appears as an icon in all of the branding materials of the seminary. When you think VTS, if you've seen any of the publications or digital formats, you'd think, oh yeah, that tower. And it turns out that that building in the 1820s, 1830s was built with enslaved labor. And as the seminary has employed more staff dedicated to researching its history along race and ethnicity, more information has been coming to light about its being built exclusively with slave labor. Such conversations now are part of the fabric of the seminary, and it is acknowledged right off the bat that an endowment fund to support reparations in whatever ways may be appropriate is simply a starting point. A starting point yet that emerges out of long years of conversation. And so this endowment that is being started will be spent over the years. Annual contributions will be made toward the descendants of enslaved people who worked at the seminary and who built that very tower. It will go to support the work of Black alumni. It will go to raise up African American clergy. It will go toward any initiatives that promote justice and inclusion on the part of local congregations. As they are quick to say and have said, that though no amount of money can ever truly compensate for slavery, the commitment of financial resources means that the institution's attitude of repentance is being supported by actions of repentance that can have significant impact both on the recipients of the funds as well as on those at the seminary. It is only a start, yet I am also moved at how it is an action that helps to show what they stand for and helps to make concrete and visible, indeed an outward and visible sign of the heart of God, such that by their 200th anniversary, the hope that is in them is that when one sees that tower, one may think of justice, of inclusion, of repentance that is always ongoing. And the question stands before us today as ever. What do we stand for? What have we stood for? What will we stand for? It is a question that is always before us, and one thing we can say today, as ever, is that we stand together on nothing else but the mercy of God. Amen.
Amen.